Hello mate, my name's Gareth and welcome to Eno Wrestling. Today we're going to be doing a tier list where we go over AEW's best matches from the year 2021. I think it was the top 15 matches from Cage Match that were ranked. If you don't know what a Cage Match is, it's a website where people can rank matches. So yeah, that's from like a pool of however many people it is, a few hundred people have ranked AEW matches. So I picked the top 15 from there, so really that should be quite a good consensus. And then I also just put in 10 matches that I liked, which were also all highly ranked on Cage Match as well. I'm going to be ranking these just solely on my opinion, so if you disagree, you can let me know which order you would do or what you disagree with. The categories we've got, obviously at the top we've got Match of the Year, which I'll be getting to at the end, which will be my personal Match of the Year. Match of the Year Contender, and that will be the matches I'll have to pick from at the end of the video. On the Edge are ones where I was just like, I couldn't quite put it there, but it's just a rung below, as tier lists work. Then I've got just a banger, which is just a really good match, but not quite really Match of the Year contender quality. And then an outside shout, which might be something which I really liked, or that a lot of people really liked, but it didn't really quite hit that level. So let's get straight into it. We're going to start, though, I think, with Britt Baker, Dr. Britt Baker, versus Thunder Rosa, and this was their unsanctioned match from the St. Patrick's Day Slam. A lot of people have put it right up there, which is why I've got to put it in there, really, and it deserves to be in there anyway, but a lot of people are actually saying this is their match of the year, which I do disagree with. Let's spoil it now, it won't be the number one at the top, but I do think it deserves to be in that conversation. A fantastic match, not just what they did in terms of, you know, in the ring and in the match itself, but it was a huge kind of monumental moment for women's wrestling as a whole in North America. So yeah, for a lot of reasons, it was a very, very great match, and I think it's one which it will outlast a lot of these other ones on this list just because of that kind of historic kind of value to it. So fantastic match, really. And next up, I think I've got to go with Bryan Danielson versus Minora Suzuki, and I think I've got to put it in banger, even though I absolutely love this match. It kind of just felt like it was a match that I had seen quite a few times before. Like if you've ever watched New Japan, you'll probably see a match very similar to this. You kind of have seen this match a few times. You might have just seen my dog there. You might have seen this match a few times, but it was a really, really great example of, you know, that style of match. Again, this is another one which I think a lot of people have very high on their list, as, you know, a lot of people have all these matches very high on their list, because they're all great matches, and it's all kind of comes down to your opinion, really, I guess. When you're separating matches this good, there's no really objective value you can put on them, for a lot of them anyway. But for me, I've just got to put this in banger. Next up, I'm going to be looking at the Young Bucks versus SCU, and I really want to put this on the Edge because I think this is a really, really underrated match. I think the storytelling within it was fantastic, and then just the athleticism and the work rate throughout it as well was also fantastic. But ultimately, I think just when you're thinking about how you rate a match, it's not just what they did in the ring, it's kind of how they built to that match and then what that match meant ultimately in the wider scheme of things. And I do think AEW kind of dropped the ball on this, because I do think this is a match that should be on the Edge, or maybe even there, because what they did in the ring kind of deserves that, but everything else around it, I think I've just got to put it in banger, similar to Bryan Danielson versus Suzuki. Even though Young Bucks versus SCU, I think they actually, like I say, this is a really, really underrated match, but I can't quite put it higher than that for the reasons I explained. So yeah, the same kind of logic really applies to Serenade versus Riho. This is another match which I really personally loved, but it wasn't built to in the way it necessarily should have been. It wasn't really paid off the way it should have been. Part of that is issues with AEW and their booking of the women's division, of course. Part of that is just because it was for the NWA title. They just thought, well, it's not our title. This is just going to be a fun match to put on the buy-in. And it was great. It was a banger. We've got a few bangers in there now, so I think we need to fill up some of the other tiers to, you know, make this look a bit better. So just for that reason, let's go with something a bit different. I'm going to go with MJF versus Sami Guevara. I think this was a really fun match and a lot of people really liked it. I think it's one which will ultimately be a little bit forgotten just because it was a little bit lost in that feud between the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle. And also I think as great as it was very reliant on MJF's kind of shenanigans and his cheating and stuff. There was a lot of that within it. I do think this, you know, it really made Sami Guevara in my eyes. It's the match which, more than any, I was like, he can really do a big match like that. And that was great to see, but it is an outside shout for me. I wouldn't quite put it at the level of Banger, just because I think those other matches, they've got something that this one doesn't have. I think in the next one we can kill two birds with one stone, because I think Kenny Omega versus Rey Fenix and Kenny Omega versus Jungle Boy both kind of did the same job. I'm actually going to move Jungle Boy down to outside shout, because it was a slightly worse version of Kenny Omega versus Rey Fenix. So if we're thinking about it logically, and you know, there's only one match of the year, you would automatically eliminate that one from contention, because Kenny Omega versus Phoenix was just better, at least my opinion anyway. But these two matches kind of fill a similar spot. There were two title defenses for Kenny against kind of two athletic guys, very, very fun matches. The one with Kenny and Phoenix, I think a lot of people would put it there, but for me personally, I think there's just other matches on here that maybe we'll put it on the edge. We'll put it on the edge. For me personally, I definitely wouldn't have it in my match of the year contender, you know, list of that, but I do think it was a great match, and I do think a lot of people would have it higher. So yeah, we will leave Kenny versus Jungle Boy there though, because I do think it is more of an outside shout when you consider that Phoenix match. I feel like we've filled up a lot of this lower tiers now, and I want to get something quite big in there. So let's just go big with CM Punk versus Eddie Kingston. A lot of people are having this as their match of the year contender, and I've got a video coming out which kind of focuses on this feud and the match. And in that, I'll go into more detail about why this match was so great and why this feud was so fantastic. But yeah, a lot of people I've got this as their match of the year, and it's one where I can absolutely understand why, because it is a fantastic match, and it's kind of wrestling at its most simple, and that's kind of what's so great about it for me. There's nothing about it where that'll blow your mind necessarily. It's just fantastic entertainment, and ultimately that is what wrestling kind of should be at the end of the day. So amazing match. A really, really underrated match for me is Jungle Boy versus Dax Harwood. This was near the start of the year, and it was a really, really great match. I remember at the time when it happened, I was thinking, that'll be TV match of the year. I kind of forgot that this was AEW and they're going to do some ridiculous stuff on TV, as we saw. It was a great big win for Jungle Boy at the time. I think a lot of people will forget about how kind of big that was for him at the time, because a lot of the stuff that he'd done in AEW was tag wrestling up until then. And this was the year where Jungle Boy really established himself as a singles competitor. He kind of did a lot of different things that kind of pushed him up the rungs of like the AEW ladder, I guess. And this was kind of the first step in the year for him in doing that. So a lot of people will forget that as well. Next up, and I do think this one might be a little bit controversial, just because I know a lot of people love this match, and I love it as well. Again, I love all these matches on this list. But I'm going to put the triple threat match at Double or Nothing, Pac versus Kenny Omega versus Orange Cassidy. I'm going to put that into On the Edge, because I don't think it did quite reach the match of the year contender level. I don't think it's really in that discussion, even though it is, without doubt, in my mind anyway, one of the greatest triple threat matches of all time. Just because it didn't really feel monumental. Like, after it finished, it was kind of just done, you know. It was an amazing match, and the way it built to was a little bit sloppy as well, because obviously things didn't go as planned, which isn't all their fault necessarily, but yeah, it just kind of felt like it was a really fun match, but that's all it was, which is fine. But it just wasn't quite, that's the reason I wouldn't put it quite in that tier. Now this next one is just one I wanted to kind of give a shout to, because within this tier list I wanted to kind of give a shout to some matches which maybe people might have forgotten about a little bit. For example, that Dax Harwood versus Jungle Boy one, and this next one is Veni versus Emi Sakura, which was in the women's AEW Women's Championship Eliminated Tournament earlier in the year. And this was obviously on the Japan side of the bracket, and this was just a fantastic match. I could have picked other ones like Aja Kong versus Ryo Mizunami. I really enjoyed as well. And you know, there were others as well, but I think this is the one that stood out the most for me, and really kind of showcased that different style to a new audience, hopefully. Anyway, it is an outside shout, because I don't think anyone's really going to have this in the conversation, but I just wanted to give it a little shout, because as much as we're trying to find the match of the year in this video, we're also reflecting on the year and looking at what were some of the best matches. So, and this was definitely one of them for me. So yeah. Another match which I think has gone a little bit kind of under the radar is Pac versus Dax Harwood. Not quite as good as that Dax Harwood versus Jungle Boy match, but this Pac one was kind of probably better worked in terms of just the technical aspect of it. Maybe not, but it was a fantastic little match, and very similar to Veni versus Emi Sakura. Just one I wanted to give a little shout out to. It is an outside shout. no one's really going to be giving this match of the year, but a great match regardless. I feel like we're just knocking these out now, so let's get it out of the way. Kenny Omega versus Christian. I think it was a great match, of course, like all the matches on this list are. But for me, I think it was a little bit overrated at the time. I loved it, you know, I really enjoyed it, but it was something which kind of came and went, and, you know, it was a great moment for Christian. We're talking about their match on Rampage. I think it was better than one at All Out. It was a match which, at least for me, didn't quite invest me as some of the other matches, but still an amazing match. And again, just like all the other matches on this tier, deserves a little shout. Serenade versus Sakarashida. This is their second match, the one that was in the TBS tournament. So not their first match and not their tiebreaker match, I guess, at least for now, because it looks like that feud's actually going to continue. This is their second match, which I do think was their best. I really just loved everything about this match. Very similar to Serenade versus Riho or Dax Harwood versus Jungle Boy, where it's just so technically sound, and just I was just enthralled in every single aspect of the match as it was happening. Again, it's not really going to be touching anyone's match of the year lists, but it's one I wanted to give a shout to, and probably I personally enjoyed a little bit more than the other ones below it, just because it kind of felt like it really meant something in this women's division, and it's very rare that you actually see that in AEW. That's why I put this here rather than there, because none of these matches really felt like they mattered as much, you know? I don't know if this one is something that people will agree with or not, but I'm going to put CM Punk versus Darby Allin on the edge, just because I do think it was a fantastic match, which kind of get a little bit slept on just because of how exciting All Out was as a whole. Maybe if this had main evented, people might view this match slightly differently. I remember there was kind of discourse around this match. Some people saying it was a 5-star match, some people were saying it was like 4 stars, some people were saying even lower than that, and to be honest, they don't really know what they're talking about, in my opinion. But yeah, this match, it kind of did split opinion a little bit, so a lot of people will probably say it's more down there, some people will say it's there, some people will say it's there. I don't think anyone would put it any higher than on the edge. But I'm going to be kind to it because I did really love that match. I loved the kind of callbacks to Bret Hart versus the 1-2-3 Kid, of course. I wrote an article about that, which you might have seen, you might not have, over on Pro Wrestling Musings. But yeah, a lot of people were, you know, pointing that out. Of course, it wasn't just me. I'm not trying to take credit for that. But this is a fantastic match, and I think it does get a little bit slept on when we talk about like the best matches of the year. So I'm going to put it in on the edge, but it's not really in that conversation any more than that, is it? So yeah, that is where it is. And if we carry on, another Darby Allin match, the one versus MJF, I'm going to put in match of the year contender, because I have seen a lot of people actually putting this as their match of the year. And I can understand it, but I've got to say I don't agree with it. I do have to say that. I can understand it though. For me, I did prefer CM Punk versus Eddie Kingston at Full Gear, just because I'm much more interested in a story than I am in technical wrestling. And whilst the story between Darby Allin and MJF was still very good, it wasn't quite as great, or I'm looking for a word. Can't think of the word. But it didn't invest me personally as much as CM Punk versus Eddie Kingston did. So that is why I would probably put this match above Darby Allin versus MJF. But both fantastic matches, and you know, part of the reason why Full Gear was such a great show as well. Moving on, we've got the Elite versus Hangman Page and Dark Order. I do think this was a fantastic match, and when you look back on it, and there's the reasons for why the result happened the way it did, and all that kind of thing, I can understand why some people will put it lower, but for me, I'm going to put it on banger, because I do think it was a fantastic match, and it really did help with the story for me, that second loss for Hangman, and then the way he was kind of written off after it as well. When he came back, that made it all the more better for me. So I think from a story perspective, and when I look back on it in years to come, I do think that's going to be a match where I'm going to, you know, enjoy going back over. John Silver's little kind of, his flurry towards the end was so fantastic, and then it really solidified Kenny Omega as someone that I really wanted Hangman to beat as well. Obviously before I wanted Hangman, I think everyone wanted Hangman to beat Kenny, but I just couldn't, I wasn't getting worked by him, I guess. And after this match, it really, you know, didn't upset me, because I knew I had faith, but I was kind of really then wanting Hangman to come back and get it done. So yeah, for that reason, I've got to put it in banger above Outside Shout, I think, for me. If I was to put it on this level, I think that's a bit of an insult to this match, to be honest. I think it's quite a level above these. We're getting a little bit bottom heavy again here, so let's go through some of these more important matches now. The steel cage match between the Young Bucks and the Lucha Brothers. This is another one which I've seen a lot of people give their match of the year, and for a while this was my match of the year. I'm now not quite sure. It might still be my match of the year. I'm still not actually quite sure exactly how I'd rank things. I am going to make a decision at the end of this video, but I'm not going to lie, I'm not fully sure of it yet. I've got one that I think it is, but I might end up changing my mind. I might convince myself to change my mind, and this is one that could help me change my mind. So it's definitely up there. I loved the Penta diving in for Phoenix, because you don't often see much character from the Lucha Brothers. It's kind of one of their weaknesses when it comes to being an act on American TV, but in that match you absolutely did see it, and that was something which I really loved. Fantastic match. Another Young Bucks match I'm gonna put on the edge, just for similar reason to why I didn't put Phoenix versus Kenny on the same level as Jungle Boy versus Kenny. I think the Young Bucks, this is just their second best title defense of the year, and so if it's not as good as that one, I shouldn't be putting it on the same level by that logic, really, because I can already eliminate it from the conversation, if you get what I mean. So for that reason, it's on the edge. But I adore this match. It's one of my favourite matches of the year, and I probably like it a bit more than some of the other ones I'll put on this, but, you know, I'm trying to make an objective argument rather than just go with solely on my opinion, you know, or how I feel about the match. But an amazing match. Really felt special as well. The first show being back with crowds, the place just exploded for the entire match, and it was such a great thing to watch. It was just one of my happiest times ever watching wrestling, so I'll never forget that. But from trying to be objective, I don't think it's as good as the steel cage match. And I think for a similar reason, I've got to put, because I've put this, it was an amazing match, but didn't quite mean quite as much as Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston versus the Young Bucks. And to be honest, I don't think the match was quite as good, personally, from my opinion. I do think a few people will actually disagree with that. I think a few people might swap those. But, you know, that's what I think, and that's why I've got to put it on banger rather than on the edge. I don't think anyone will put that in their conversation for match of the year, so I don't think you can put it any higher than banger, really. And Pac versus Andrade 2, their first match was fantastic. Their second match I think was a little bit better. I'm going to put it in Outside Shout, even though this is probably the best one out of these. But I just can't quite put it on the level of the rest of these, just because I think it was just a great match and that not much more. And I think all of these had a little bit more. I think they all had a little bit more to them than Pac versus Andrade. So yeah, I've got to put that on Outside Shout, but I will put it first on Outside Shout, just because I do think it's the best of that bunch, if you know what I mean. And now, I've saved 4 great matches for last. I've got Bryan Danielson versus Eddie Kingston, and I'm going to put it on Match of the Year contender, because I do think a lot of people will have it up there. No, I won't. I'm going to put it as on the edge, but I'm going to put it as number 1 on the edge. I'm going to put that as number 2 as well, by the way, and I'm going to put that there. Yeah, I think Bryan Danielson versus Eddie Kingston, it was a really great match, but when I was looking at Eddie Kingston versus CM Punk, I think that just went to another level. This was amazing, and I do think there are probably people who have that as their match of the year. I do think I have seen that actually out there. So, and I can understand it, but for me, I just don't think it's on the level of any of these. And part of the reason for that, again, is that I don't think it really will have this monumental kind of thing. When we look back at 2021, I don't think this is the match that will define it for me within AEW. And so for that reason, I can't really put it in the discussion. And these are matches which I think are in the discussion, but I do think it's just on the edge of that discussion. Now, these final 3, I will just put them all in. I shall do it as I speak about them, but they're all going to go in Match of the Year contender. Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page. Amazing match. This, for me, I think a lot of people kind of really underrate this match, just because maybe it wasn't the classic that they wanted. For example, Kenny Omega versus Okada. But when you look at what this match needed to be for the story, the only thing left to do in this story was for Hangman to actually just run through Kenny Omega and prove that he's better than him. I do think that was the best story beat, and I do think they did that well while still delivering a really good match in itself. You know, Hangman did get quite a lot of the offense, and, you know, maybe I expected Kenny Omega to do more. Maybe I expected it to be more like Hangman versus Danielson, the way that came about, because, we might as well segue onto that one. I think that was probably more what a lot of people wanted from Hangman versus Kenny. They wanted Kenny to really beat down Hangman and make it look like it was going to be one last hurdle for Hangman to overcome. But no, Hangman just kind of proved unanimously he was the better man, and I think that is what the story actually needed. So I don't think you can use that as a criticism against this match, because I do think it was the right call to make for Hangman versus Kenny. Whereas Hangman versus Danielson is slightly different, and obviously we don't quite know the end of the story quite yet. I'm fairly sure Hangman's going to end up overcoming Danielson, and this draw was a great way to kind of set that up. If you follow me on Twitter, you might know that I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of the draw. I think this match was so perfect. If it just had a winner, it had an ending, but if it had a winner, I think that would have been the perfect match. And so I was a little bit annoyed that they kind of gave away or gave up the perfect match to kind of drag the story on a bit longer. But also, if they can then deliver that perfect match again and actually have the winner, then it's a great little thing. So I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the result, but yeah, I do think it's definitely in the discussion. I don't think you can. Well, some people might debate that, but I don't think you can. And you know what? We're going to go straight for it. My match of the year, I'm not going to change my mind. I think it's Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson. I think this is the match which I'm going to define AEW with for the year, because when you think about two of the biggest things that happened in the year, it was Kenny Omega's title reign, and it was the new signings like Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, and those guys. And at AEW's biggest ever show, I think we can kind of all agree with that, it was just such an amazing thing to watch. And I probably, I could easily make an argument for Hangman versus Danielson. I could easily make an argument for the Young Bucks versus the Lucha Brothers. I can make an argument for all of the matches that are on that level. But I don't think the steel cage match really mattered as much as Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson. And I don't ultimately think Hangman versus Danielson did either. But maybe if there had been the winner in that match, I might be saying that more so. Because also another thing, great big huge thing in AEW this year was the rise of Hangman finally getting to the top, So yeah, I could definitely see arguments for any of the ones on this list. Below that, I could just about see an argument for Bryan Danielson versus Eddie Kingston if you subjectively wanted to make that. The same for the Young Bucks versus Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. I could just about see that. I can't really see it for any others. Maybe just about the triple threat. But I think when you're picking match of the year, it's got to be more than what you personally enjoyed the most. It's what kind of the match that kind of defines the year for you. And for me, that is Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson. So that's the match I'm going to go with. And I am going to stick with that. I'm going to lock it in now. I'm not going to change my mind. Although I probably will before the end of the year. But yeah, I want to know what you think. Which ones of these would you change? First of all, do you think that CM Punk versus Darby Allin deserves to be more in the conversation? Do you think I'm overrating it, for example? Do you think Danielson versus Suzuki is actually in the contendership for match of the year? You might do, and fair enough if you do. But yeah, let me know what you think. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this. I'm going to have a couple more tier lists just because I quite like them as a way to round up the year. It kind of allows me to go through everything and talk about it quickly, reflect on it, and then give it a little ranking and just go, yeah, that's what I think the best of the year was. So that's my match of the year. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later, mate.